This episode is brought to you by CBUSA. For nearly 2 decades, CBUSA has been helping independent home builders better their businesses, and it all began with a group of industry leaders just like you looking to do just that. As the nation's largest group purchasing organization in the residential construction industry, they're able to bring home builders together to compete, frankly, on a national scale. By getting builders to group together, you're creating a buyer group that is now going to help you negotiate better deals and better rebates, even nationally. If you're a local builder here in Minnesota, you're in luck because CBUSA is proud to announce that in Q1 of 24, they're coming to Minneapolis. So if you'd like to know more about this journey and be part of the builders here that are going to have advantages being the first ones in, please reach out to Ryan Lipchek from CBUSA. You can also listen to his story on episode 26 of The Curious Builder. This episode is brought to you by Adaptive, the software for builders that automates draws, budgets, and bookkeeping with AI. For over a year now, I've been partnered with Adaptive, and they've just been an amazing game changer in terms of efficiency in our time and all our bookkeeping. From the time we get an invoice, we import it into their system. The AI codes it, cost codes it, job codes it. All we have to do is review it, pass it through the people internally in the office, all digitally, and then it gets approved and paid all via ACH. It's becoming extremely fast and saving us countless hours a day and a week. When it comes to draws, all of our budgets now are set in Adaptive as well. So now when we cost code against the draws, we can do our change orders, and then with a click of a button, we can submit these draws to our title companies or to our homeowners for faster payment. If you're looking to save time, and if you're looking to be accurate, I highly recommend Adaptive. Additionally, if you'd like to listen to one of their founders share the story of Adaptive, you can listen to episode number 15 on the Curious Builder podcast.
Oh gosh, well, I don't know. I'm like, it was the winter and the spring, but obviously it was a carryover from many years and many things and doing things and growing pains and exploring through things. And I think the biggest thing for me, like last year, what I felt that I see now was like I was just getting sucked, is the best way to explain it, by a lot of people that are literally soul suckers. And like, my brother gave me this book. It's called Give or Take, and I read through it, and I have now done the audiobook, and I'm just like, it was one of the best books I ever read. And it really talked about how people can show up as givers, but really they're takers, and they might not realize it either.
Welcome to the Curious Builder podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today I'm joined with Morgan Molitor, again from Construction to Style. She was on a year ago, and this marks our first repeat guest. So thanks for coming on, Morgan.
Crazy. Thanks for having me back. And when was it?
I actually would have to look. I want to say you were like in the first 5 episodes.
Okay.
So you were pretty early on, probably December, January, basically a year ago.
Okay. Well, just thinking about, because we're going to talk about last year, and I was like, oh my gosh, what point of my highs or lows was that?
Well, and it's funny is that you and I talk probably weekly or several times a week. So then for us to think like, oh, it was a year ago that we had, because I don't know about you, but I can't really spatially analyze all the times that we talk. So we're pretty aware of what's happening in each other's lives because of how often we blur together.
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously this particular episode, we won't dive into Construction to Style so much. I thought kind of as the end of the year wraps up, 23 was kind of a rough year for me. I was one of the more challenging years in business I've had. There were some real highs and significant lows. And I thought we'd kind of just talk a little bit about what it's like owning a business and how it's really difficult. I think it would resonate with a lot of people. And if nothing else, it's therapy for you and I.
Yeah. How it's a roller coaster, right? I think you and I and colleagues, everyone, it's just like, even within one day, it's just like up, down, up, down.
That's a very accurate. Even a day
very
is
aggressive too.
Very analogous for an entire year.
Yeah, I know.
How? Why don't we start with that? Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of your highs and lows for this year?
Yeah. Well, last year, right?
Year, sorry, wrong year.
I know. I'm like, last year, but it's kind of crazy to think back on last year because I'm like, I just even rewind to the spring, and everything before that honestly feels like 5 years ago. I'm like, it feels like such a lifetime ago. And it was just last year. It's like, for how much happened last year of good things, we did a lot of things to take new challenges, new risks, new opportunities. Some were successful, others miserably failed. And we had many jobs that were amazing and successful, and a couple that weren't, that really put us on, I don't even know the word of how to describe it, but just like really checked us and like what we're doing and what we want to be doing. And it just made us take some time to slow down to really think about just like clarity and to be doing only the things that we want to be doing within our life too.
You know what I am referring to, so you can talk about it directly if you want. But sometimes there's a marketing opportunity that you take and you think this is going to be a great move for my career. And then it turns out to be a terrible venture. But yet when you're done with it, and in some ways, you know, sometimes you're never done with some of these things, you look back and you're like, it was really painful, especially because you had all these hopes and expectations of what it could be.
Right.
But then the reality is that even through that disappointment, you learn a lot.
Yeah.
Would you feel like that's accurate?
Yes, 100%. And actually, I was talking with someone yesterday about Resilience to Reform, our nonprofit, and we were just talking about different things that's come up for myself and for this specific person. And they were incarcerated. But anyway, we were just talking through like what we put our families through and all that. Like, never do we want to think about it again. But at the same time, we're so glad the pain's there, because then it just kind of checks you to never redo things in your life again. And that comes with opportunities too. Like when we fail miserably, it's like we have that moment to be like, okay, we learned so much. And yeah, that really sucked and hurt financially or personally or whatever it is. But it's like, I'm just thankful for pain that I went through in my life, because it's made me the person I am. And people that haven't went through any pain, like those aren't my people. And when I meet them sometimes, I'm like, gosh, what a nice life, but also what an awful life to live.
I think you're right. I mean, I think like, you know, let's call them emotional scars, emotional trauma. And I think that means different things, obviously, to different people. But I think like a physical scar, like I have a scar on my hand. Actually, I remember I think I was like 10 years old and I had a big knife and I was cutting through a water bottle and I went right through it and went right into the beat of my hand. But every time I look at this hand, I see the scar and I'm reminded of that. I wonder if business isn't like that a little bit. Like sometimes we need a painful experience to kind of be a reminder of, it kind of helps keep safety rails on us in the future.
Oh my gosh.
And
100%.
I think our family and our team and those around us, our close confidants, our mentors, I think they can also act as those sounding boards as well, because sometimes you're about to launch into a new endeavor and you're like, well, I better check this with a few people.
Right.
And, you know,
and we use that for one another. Like me and you will call each other and be like, does this sound like an awful idea or is this a good idea? However, we probably shouldn't be each other's sounding board.
You and I should not be each other's sounding board. As I told you before the post, my wife said that you and I are spirit animals to each other. And so you and I pretty much will always encourage the other to do whatever the person's saying. Yeah. So
take the risk.
We definitely cannot, we don't have veto power because the only thing that we see is green lights.
Yeah. However, we have good morals, ethics, values, and we always check those for one another to make sure the decision is a reflection of that.
Yeah, for sure.
But I would say, going back to your scar thing, even driving here, I took back roads because it's rush hour time right now and I live far away. But I'm driving here and I like love that route from Elk River to Excelsior on the back roads. But as I was coming here, I was like, client. And all these triggers were coming into play. Like, oh, I loved driving when I took a right there. I love that. Or, oh, I took left there. I never want to make that left turn again. Like,
it's so funny you said there it's a couple of years now past a very difficult situation for me, and it's one thing that nobody ever tells you until you own a business or until you go through a difficult trial period is, and I'm someone that I'm pretty resilient to a lot of this, but no one's above it, and I'm gonna call it emotional. I don't know if, again, emotional trauma, what the word is, but like you look at your phone and somebody calls and maybe you've dealt with this client, trade partner, whoever it might be.
Yeah.
But it's like even the sight of their name sort of triggers a physiological response, right? You
100%.
Sweat, you
get sick to your stomach, you get like physically ill.
I get it. I'm not much of a dreamer because I just sleep so hard. But sometimes, especially if things are coming to a head, you know, there's some difficult situation, like, you know how you have that light REM sleep early in the morning and I'll wake up and I'll be dreaming about it. Like, that's when I know I have to deal with it because it's so rare that happens. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, this needs to be kind of put to rest and dealt with, whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing too, because of last year that I'm really focusing on this year is like, I would say clearing the clutter, clearing the noise, clearing the chaos, like everything that made my life chaotic, whether that comes to work or personal, anything. I'm just like, put it to rest, get rid of it, and make it just done forever. Yeah. And for that to be known too, so that it doesn't like resurface or try to come into your life. And I'm just like, I'm closing a lot of doors and being aware of why, and then being very hesitant for new doors to open. Yeah.
I think, when we first met, it's only been 2 years. Doesn't it seem
crazy.
like a lifetime?
Yes.
But, we met 2 years ago at the Contractor Coalition in Nashville, and we talked about that a bit on our last episode, and we'll touch base a little bit about it because we have some news to share this spring from Minneapolis. But before we get there, I had remember asking you, you had said one of the reasons that you had gotten to where you felt you were today was saying yes to every opportunity.
I know.
And over the last year, I'd say, let's call it middle of summer, you started reversing that and started just saying and finding liberty and saying no.
Yeah.
Walk me a little bit in the audience through that change in mindset. Because is it fair to say that you're kind of, it wasn't wrong to say yes, it led you to a certain place. And now it's just the right time to start saying no. Walk us through how you balance that.
Well, I think, and I'm still learning this, but I'm like, the biggest thing is just like boundaries and what those boundaries are and protecting those boundaries, again, to make sure that everything's related back to your bigger picture vision. So at the beginning of this year, or I guess last year and throughout the year, like the last couple quarters of last year, Jamie and I just really dialed in like what our life goals are, what our life goals are first, and then how our brands and businesses can support our life goals to be living that sort of lifestyle. And so I think just having that clarity, and like we wrote them down, I have it hanging up on my wall, and like just for that to be a reminder of everything I say yes to, like it really has to be a reflection of like to get us to that goal. If it's not going to get us to that goal, there's really no point of it. And I think just with that clarity too, like a lot of things that get presented to me, I'm just looking at them and I'm like, is this just to do another thing? Or is this just to, a lot of things too that have been like eye-awakening is because I'm a projector, if you do all those tests. And one of the things, good and bad things about a projector is that a lot of people lean on you for a lot of different support. And they know that you have potentially the resource or another person to connect them to, or you just project good energy too. And so a lot of times what I was realizing is like people are coming to me for these ideas like for themselves, but they didn't know it either. And I'm like, it really had no benefit for the long-term game for me. So I'm like, what am I doing?
It's interesting. So if I can understand that or recap that. So you and Jamie kind of came up with a sort of a master lifestyle life plan, and then basically use that framework as you make business decisions. You are saying, does this in line with my master life plan?
Yes.
And if it is, you accept it or move forward with that opportunity. And if it's not, you're using it as a template to essentially say no to it.
Right.
Are you finding that, are you having success with that? Because
yes.
It's a noble.
But it's still really hard.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, I'm slowly, doing it. Yeah, I'm practicing. And I think too, a lot of the work is like, it's kind of like with your business, like when you start a new company, you see the profits, what do they say, like 3 to 5 years after that. So I'm kind of like, okay, I'm probably not going to see like all this hard work that I'm doing now, like immediately. And it's going to take this slow time to also clear the noise that I have welcomed in. But yeah, I'm already seeing it. I feel it like, yeah, just every day just feels so much lighter. And
do you feel,
why didn't I do this a million years ago?
And this is a question I guess I can only because you and I do have some similar characteristics and personality. So I'll use this for myself and see if you have it with you. Do you find that, I'll call it the chase of the sale, like that, those first couple meetings with whether it's the brand, the pitch, like it's really exciting to get that first sale, almost like there's an emotional high to getting it.
Yeah.
Would you say it's almost more powerful than actually doing the work? Have you ever thought about it in that terms? Like,
no, I haven't.
In the sense, like I love design. So someone mentioned the other day, like, what do you like most about building, or why do you build? And I've been doing it for 20 years, and I love the camaraderie with our trade partners.
Yeah.
And I love, I love seeing the home come together.
Yeah.
But if I'm being really honest, I think my favorite part is meeting the clients the first time, getting them really excited, getting into architecture, getting into design, seeing nothing come into something beautiful.
Right.
I'm less enamored at the process now.
Yeah.
Because it is very arduous. It's a lot of work. I really like the front end of it.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm saying. So it's kind of like the sale.
Yeah.
It's akin to essentially dating. It's like, you like the first couple dates, but it's not the full relationship.
Right.
And anyway, I'm just curious if that resonates with you or not really. If that's
for sure. And I think for me, like the biggest thing is like the communication side or not communication, like relationship side, which comes down to communication, but like that's what I've realized that I love the most is like our relationship with our clients, our relationships with colleagues, our brand, brands that we work with, all the different events we put on, like just the relationship, and also like seeing others thrive. Like really, I love that.
Now that I would 100% say amen to. That part really energizes me.
Yeah, same. And so I'm like, what I was realizing is like, that's the kind of life I want to be living. Because also when, even our financial advisor asked us the other day, like, if you didn't have to live, like if paycheck wasn't a means, like how would you be living your life? And I'm still thinking about that because I'm like, I love working. Like I think I will always be working. But then he would challenge me with like, if it's working, then what do you want to be doing that literally makes you feel like it's Christmas every single morning? And I'm like, that's how I want to be living my life. So just thinking about like, if I love the relationship side, if I love that process, and probably just like what you're saying, it's like just ensuring then every single one of those is with someone that wants to flourish and see it win too. Like, I don't want to be chasing a sale. I don't want to be chasing the money. I don't ever want to convince someone why they need to hire us or why they need to come to one of our events. I'm like, I don't know. So I'm like,
no,
that's,
I think, isn't it funny too? Because how long have you been building, number one, and then two, how long have you been doing, let's call it event structures?
So 2012 is when we started Construction to Style. So that was like our brand. And when we started working with brands, building out websites, learning affiliate, all that. 2015 is when Jamie got his contractor's license. Right. So building since then. And then what was the last one?
Well, no, the events, like when
events.
BizComs and the Contractor Coalition, I know is a couple years old, but when did you really start to take sail on a lot of these events and organizing? And
I would say 2017, and I was actually working at a digital marketing agency in Minneapolis, and I started putting on events for them, for people to come in and learn marketing tips and tricks. And then once our second kid was born, then I quit and then just continued doing them on my own.
I mean, just this thought of you get so much joy and satisfaction that you love that, like that is your joy.
Yeah.
Do you find that when you're at home, like with the kids, I mean, one of the things that I struggle with is like being present. Like I want to play with the kids, and I do, and I do my best. But there's never enough time, right? And I think any business owner, I mean, frankly, almost every person, but for sure business owners, it's like sometimes you're at dinner table and I'll be looking off, out into nowhere, and my kids or my wife will be like, "What are you looking at?"
Yeah.
And you're like completely zoned out, thinking about how to deal with this, and like you're there physically, but emotionally, and you're not present in that very moment. How do you struggle with that?
I struggle with that all the time.
Yeah.
And I would say too, going back to just the boundaries and time management and stuff like that, like one thing Jamie and I actually did last year was every weekend or every Sunday is a no plan Sunday, no matter what. Like we are home, whether we're working or doing other things, but like as a family unit, we're home. And I think that was like such a game changer for our family. And one thing I'm learning, and especially with entrepreneurs, is like our weekends are times where it needs to be our time. Like, even though that sounds really selfish, but like we need to recheck ourselves. We need to rest. We need to have family time or what have you. But I think that too, when friends or whatever, even other family, like will reach out and be like, let's do this. And you're free. And I'm like, yeah, I'm free, but like, I'm not free. Like I need that time to mentally just be here.
I would
be home
as a supercharged extrovert, and I would, if I've mentioned this before, but like if plans were canceled, I would, let's say my wife was like, I'm going to be gone with the kids. This never happens, but let's just say they were gone for like a weekend.
Yeah.
I would fill it to the brim with all these people. As I get older, I find that having that time, I would still maybe do one thing or two things, but like not 10 things.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Cause like our weekends is, you have your kid events and things like that. But, it's, we're both runners, my wife and I, right? So she'll do a couple hour run. I'll do a couple hour run.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe take a nap on a Sunday or something like that, but basically you kind of need that downtime. What I find is I'm not able to keep up with what's happening during the week. So I feel like it sort of creeps in on the weekends and it's so nice because people aren't emailing you. So it's like a war of who's filling up whose inbox. I'm going to fill up their inbox so they don't fill up my inbox.
I know.
But it's like this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And then during the week, we have all these meetings and then I feel like you get behind the ball, if you will.
Yes.
How have you navigated that? Because you mentioned something right before we got here is that you are trying to dial down the sense of urgency so that you don't anxiety, stress? Like, how have you been able to sort of flip the switch on that?
Yeah. Well, that's another one that's been hard, but like the biggest thing that it's been huge for, I mean, and we all have anxiety and we all have stressors and all that, but like the sense of urgency would just kill me because I would be like, yes, I will do this. I'll get it back to you. And then I'm like, what am I doing this for? No one's going to die. And then I started realizing, like, when I let it go, when I didn't have this timeline constraint, I would always get back to them, like, in a respectful timeline too. But I was like, nothing happened even when I didn't, And I'm like, why am I putting all this pressure on myself? Why are other people putting this pressure on me? And that comes down to like new leads that are coming in. Like, when can you get us a quote by? And it's like, oh my gosh. And you try to say, like within 3 weeks. Well, 3 months later, you're kidding. Because I'm like, you want to get them an accurate one. So you're, again, not wasting all this time. And you're wasting time just throwing numbers together. And so that I finally let go. And we started telling people, like, we'll get it to you when we get it to you. Like, we want to be dialed in. We want this to be accurate. And we're not going to put this like timeline on ourselves and on other people too, because that stresses other people out. And then I think, with other brands and companies and everything like that, it's made me realize, why am I putting a timeline on other people? So instead, I kind of, when things need to be done and when I need answers, because obviously you need to keep your businesses going, then I just say, like, I do have to have, an answer by this date, but like totally respect if you can't get it to me by then. And then you just know it's fine. And then when people do that to me too, I'm like, when a new client comes in and they're like, we're getting bids for multiple people, I need it by next Friday. I'm like, cool, good luck to you. Cause I don't need that stress. And and what I've realized with that, I'm like, we still have the same amount of money profiting. We still have the same people on our team in our circle. I'm like, nothing has changed. And I've let all that go.
That's a healthy perspective. I've, over the last year and a half, and I've learned a lot from you, both at Contractor Coalition and just in our personal dynamic of learning how to work with sponsors and bigger companies. Because as a small entrepreneur, company of 5, now 3, I feel like the benefit of a small company or small team is we can move quite quickly. You can pivot extremely fast.
Yes.
Because you don't have this big organization. One of the benefits of a big organization, at least with us, a small company working with them, it's also a frustration, is that you're right about urgency. Because let's say if you're going to do a live event in July, you might not get an answer for a couple months, even starting now. It's a lot longer play. So there's less urgency. And I get it. They have a lot of other things going on. The benefit of that is, I don't feel like I need to, if I meet with them and they say, we need our pitch within the next, normally I would say, okay, you're going to need it in the next week.
Yeah.
But it'd be fine with saying, like, when do you need this by? And like, oh, well, our manager meeting is what, it could be 30 days.
Yeah. And
it's not that you're putting off. It's more like, okay, this is not a tier 1 priority.
Right.
And so it just helps you kind of fit it in when you have a little bit more space to do that. So I've appreciated that with the bigger companies. I think with our clients, we have one home under construction right now where, and we've done this for a long time, where we keep a bi-weekly meeting. So every 2 weeks we're meeting with the client at a set time for a couple hours. And I've found that I'm trying to not get into this email game all the time, because someone once shared, if you want less emails, send less emails. And I am very guilty of guilty of sending a lot of emails.
Yeah.
But my point with this client is, and I think it's also because they like meetings in person better. So what I'm trying to do is save up all the questions and save up all my information for those in-person meetings, and then trying to train them early on in the process that, you're obviously welcome to call me or email me with questions, of course. But let's try to save the most of the questions for when we have this time dedicated just to you.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, I don't want them to feel like I'm putting them off or like I'm ignoring them, but I want them to know that time is theirs.
And then you're going to be fully present and you're there and it's important too, because I think that's another thing is, like, I am so done with meetings about meetings. I am so done with like having conversations for no point. I'm so done with surface level conversations with anyone in my life. So all that, I'm like, and when you start doing that, then it's like that time, your meetings, your time with your family, you're way more present and more dialed in. Not to say we're not still out there dreaming and looking around and thinking about our to-do list, but
Right. No, I mean, I think you're accurate. I think the hard part is balancing, you mentioned just meetings. I get a lot of requests now to chat to talk. And I do love to do that.
Yeah.
It's just, it's not in the top 5 of my priority list. If I'm looking at my priorities,
Right.
like, what's my hot items for today or the week?
Right.
I found, for me personally, it's funny, my calendar is a pretty crazy thing to look at, but I have found that on Mondays, I have now kind of like a planner I just keep next to my computer. I still like to handwrite things.
So do I.
And so I will list all the things that week.
Yep.
And there's 4 things I'll put at the top. I just started that, so I'm pretty new into this. And it's like, these are my 4 things I have to do this week.
Yeah.
And then I'll put just kind of my brain dump on Mondays of everything else that I need to get done and kind of new ideas.
Yeah.
And then my goal is, if I can look back and if I kind of hit 80, 90% of those things, for sure I've got to hit the top 4.
Yeah.
What's funny, so in the 1 week I did this,
I
only hit one of my top 4, but I hit all the other things.
Oh.
And so it's kind of interesting. Well, some of them were 2 really big things. I knew I had to create a couple hours for each item of just dedicated think time on a kind of a controversial thing. And it's just like,
right.
I didn't really want to deal with it.
Right.
And I didn't like how I had to deal with it. So I sort of just didn't do it.
Yeah. It's too deep.
But it's still there. It's not going away until I
Right.
deal with it. And I know, like, Brad has often mentioned before, when I asked him how, he would have, way more homes than I have and a much bigger team. And
Yeah.
his advice has rang in my head a few times, which is just, don't let it simmer, deal with it immediately, move on. Don't let it live rent free, and just move on.
Yeah.
Right or wrong.
Yeah.
Just move it along, move the ball along. And, anyway, I can see the wisdom in that.
Well, and that, 100%. And I'm like, so going back to your list too. So every Sunday, that's my day to like dial things into. So I get ahead on household things. I get ahead on family things. I get ahead on work things. And again, everyone's leaving you alone. But I look at my calendar for the week. And if there's one thing that I'm even slightly like, well, first I look to see if it's serving, again, the lifestyle I want to live. And then if there's anything where I'm just like, I'm like, I just take off my calendar. And half the time I'm not rescheduling, because I look at it and I'm like, do I need this? Like, why did I say yes to this? Why do I need this in my life? If I reschedule, I'm probably not going to want to do it then either. So I'll literally just say like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I just did this last week. It was a coffee date. And I'm like, I can't make this work this week. And honestly, like, my schedule coming up is just not aligning. And I just left it at that. No hard feelings at all. And she wrote back to me actually on my way here and was like, no problem. I'm sure our lives will over whatever in the future and, overlap, and we'll get back together again. And I was like, God bless.
It's kind of liberating. Well,
yeah. I'm like,
so it's funny you say that. So for, everyone talks about how the holidays can be such a, just a lot, right?
Yeah.
You have a lot of family stuff, a lot of business stuff, year-end stuff. Everyone knows that there's a vast more amount of time that nothing's going to happen. So they try to do a lot of stuff. So this December, I really went into it where I didn't take any meetings in December.
Yeah.
And it felt really good.
Yeah.
When I say no meetings, unless it was like an active client or something like, really urgent.
Yeah.
All the coffee meetings and lunches, random meetings, I wanted to respect other people's time, and I just wasn't going to fill it up. And we were dealing with some major changes in the company. We can talk about that, I guess, if we want. But the consequence, and it felt great. The consequences is that people would say, well, when can you get together? And I'm somebody that I cannot not close the loop. It's like fundamentally impossible for me not to respond or like tie it off. It's really hard for me to say no or just leave it out nebulous, because I can't stand flaky people personally. And so it's something
that's why you got to close the door then too.
Well, I know. And so that I'm not good at that, because so then anyway, the bottom line is I lined up January and February with all these meetings that I put off in December. So guess what? January and February now completely slammed with, all these meetings that I placed. And so I delayed it for a month, yay for me. But the bad news is I've sort of just kicked the can down the road. Yeah. I haven't got to the point yet, because I don't know how to tell someone that, no, I'm not, because it's also opportunity. I mean, between the two companies,
I know it's hard.
Mark Williams Custom Homes and the Curious Builder. I mean, it's a lot of people and a lot of networking.
And that might come back to, and I'm a gut person too. And I'm like, I also had a happy hour that I said yes to last week. And for a moment I was like, is this a good yes? And I was like, no, what? It is, because it was a brand. It was a development. It will lead back to what I love the most, is the relationship building. And after that happy hour, I'm like, it was supposed to be an hour and a half. We sat there for 3 hours. It led to so many other things about what she does in her personal life, that there's so many other overlaps that we shared, and that I was like, I knew it. Like I knew there was a reason. So I'm just like leaning into that. But then I think the ones that you should be and you shouldn't be.
I think the hard part is I'm a optimist by nature.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the things that makes me very good at remodeling. And I use that loosely because I think in relationships too, it's like, well, this could go someplace great. So I'm always thinking like, you don't know where, and I do believe that.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, that's a part of my core. So I have a hard time of like, well, maybe this coffee leads to a build or I hire them. Or I just don't know where it's going to go. Like the other day, there's someone who's been very patient reaching out to me, and I always felt terrible. I had to cancel on them twice, and we got together, and it was amazing. I'm really glad that we talked. I found out all kinds of interesting things, and if and when the right project comes along, I might even hire them. Yeah, and I wouldn't have if I had said no to that. So that's not the norm. That's the 1 out of 50.
Yeah,
and so I have a hard time balancing that with my overall demands on my time.
Right. But then also you're saying you hate to be a flaky person, and then you have to cancel twice. So if you're more intentional about when and who and how, then that's my goal too, is like, if I say yes to something, I'm doing it. Like no rescheduling, no, whatever.
In the reschedule, I have a very firm policy on this. Well, it's actually gotten looser, but I used to have a very firm policy. It was given to me, and I've appreciated it with actually personal life, probably more than even business. And it was honor your first commitment. So if someone says, hey, we're going to have lunch with the kids on Sunday at 1:00, and, then someone else calls you that maybe you want to hang out with more or whatever it is. Like, hey, I want to go to the Vikings game or a Wild game or whatever at 1:00. No, I'm sorry. We honor your first. It sounds simple, but it actually has been super powerful for me in my life. I don't know how necessarily to apply it business-wise, because I still apply it to that lens. For instance, the reason I moved on this one gentleman was his was, quote, quote, just a coffee, but it was, I had clients who moved it. So it's like, it was, people are very understanding. I'm sorry, I have a client who's requested to come in. Like, obviously they understand that the client is paying the bills. You have to honor, that flexible schedule, if you will. This episode is brought to you by Pella Northland. For 19.5 years, I've been building homes, and 95% of all of my homes have used Pella windows. I couldn't be happier to call them a partner in our builds and our remodels. Whether you're an architect, a designer, or a remodeler, I'd highly recommend Pella windows. They can fit old homes, new homes, reclaimed, commercial, and really everything in between. Pella is a company that we trust and that we recommend to our clients. Additionally, in management, Peter and Ed have just been absolute fantastic people to work with, as well as mentors to me personally. So when it comes time to look for a window, I'd highly recommend Pella Windows. Find more at PellaNorthland.com. Also, if you're interested, you can hear episode 1 where I interview Peter and Ed together for a great listen on business and Pella Windows. Lake Society Magazine is Minneapolis' premier target market boutique lifestyle and design publication. It embodies the unique lifestyles and design of the Minneapolis City Lakes neighborhoods. From Lake of the Isles to Lake Harriet, it showcases the best in local design projects by both premier builders, architects, and interior designers in this area. Lake Society Magazine has the look and feel of a national publication with glossy covers, high-end finishes. It's mailed directly to upper-bracket single-family homeowners in the City Lakes area, and it's the perfect local coffee tabletop publication. Subscriptions can also be available through the website lakesocietymagazine.com. Additionally, publisher and founder Karen Steckel has over 27 years in the local magazine publishing industry and has a passion for high-end photography and quality graphics. Her commitment to quality, visual simplicity, and beauty are strongly reflected in her beautiful Lake Society magazine.
Well, so one thing, and I talk about this at Contractor Coalition, I think we've talked about it too, but I'm a huge tools person. And so for me, I use Calendly link, and I have that up to date at all times. And even now I'm like integrating it more with my social life too. But I have it blocked off, and Jamie and I are like true partners when it comes to our kids and business and everything like that. But we drop off our kids at 9:00 in the morning for school. And
you and Jamie?
No, one or the other.
Okay.
Sorry.
I was like, no, that is a teammate.
No, absolutely not. We never see each other during the day. We're like off on our own. But so our kids get dropped off at 9. They have to be picked up at 3:45. We live far, usually within an hour of any client or relationship we have. So anyway, my window always is 10 to 2. Is it that every day? No, because Jamie half the time is doing it, or I'm, whatever. But regardless, I have it blocked off on my calendar because I also really enjoy picking up our kids and I love to be home with them. after we get them. And I love mornings with them, and Jamie loves mornings with them. So all that to be said is like, I have a window from 10 to 2 every day. And so if someone were to contact me and say like, hey, let's do this, I would probably be like,
podcast at 9:30.
oh no. But again, this is serving so many layers. But then I know, right? Like then he's in charge and I put on his calendar and all that. But with that to be said, I'm like, I block, I'll say like, and this started again because I'm an extrovert and I would get too carried away. But Jamie would be like, can you please just like there was a lot of conflict and tension about how much I was doing at night or whatever. And I was like getting way carried away, which last year led to me having a total mental breakdown. But I just felt like I had to show up, and I was always like, well, it's work. It's work. This isn't even my friend time or my fun time. Like this is literally work. But I was saying yes to all these things. And I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I going to these? Like all of them. And so finally, Jamie was like, just say yes to one a week. And so I started that. Now, anyway, fast forward after last year, I'm like, even when it's work related, if it's after 5, it's very rare I'm going. Like, even if I'm very involved, very rare. And so just that too now, I'm like, nope, unless it's a big ask or whatever. And it serves like a lot of different categories. But so anyway, I'm putting limits on like the number of times I do things after hours, like how many per month, or coffee dates, 2 per month. That's it. And so I have it all synced on Calendly, and I have them set up because you can set up with your calendar, your workflow, different things like that. But even new client meetings or running a job sites, I have that on there, how many times I do it, and the rest is blocked off. So when it comes to a lot of these, asks or requests or coffee dates or phone calls, immediately I send it to them. And sometimes too, they'll be like, wow, you're booked out for 6 months. And I'm like, am I going to be home next week for 3 days with nothing on my calendar? Yes. But yes, I'm booked out for 6 months when it comes to this specific topic. So I think just having that in place and honoring it and keeping yourself in check with that, like that's been just a huge changer.
How do you not break the rule? Because I understand how you could set it in place. Because I have blocked it out in my calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, new clients. So like I've kind of, my New Year's resolution, if you will, was kind of more calendar management. So Friday mornings, I keep every week from like 10 to noon.
Yeah,
so
time blocking it. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. But then it comes up and a client says, hey, can you meet Wednesday afternoon?
I don't even look at my calendar and I'm like, here's my link.
I see.
Because I know I'll say, sure, I'll make it work. And again, I'm learning.
No, that's a good way to do it. Don't even look at it. Just
don't even look at it.
For you.
Yeah. And the benefit with that too is if it's a phone call and stuff like that, I have prompts in there that automatically do the Zoom for me, automatically get the address for me. So there's a lot of back and forth now that I'm not wasting. So I'll even say that just out of convenience to keep this work flowing while we're driving around and doing all the things we're doing. Like that kind of work gets done. So that's a huge benefit too.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to put some of those time
the workflows.
Accents. Yeah, the workflows would be super critical.
Mm-hmm.
I've found, like you, I've put things in place. I've talked about them many times as well. And I think a lot of it, I think this is where a good partner, in this case, my spouse, has helped a lot.
For sure.
In, prioritizing your kids and prioritizing your family. And if you can't be re-energized there, you can't really show up at work anyway.
No.
It's in everyone's best interest.
Mm-hmm.
And no sane person, obviously an insane person would ask this, but no sane person is going to ask you, nor should they, or if it is, it's a big red flag to walk away from, to subjugate your family for them. If anyone asked you that or expected that.
No, it's funny is last year this happened to me, and we had a client that went online, went in our emails, and because we have a content lifestyle side of our business that we make money from. So it is a legit business, it's not just doing it for fun, but we were doing something for Beckham, and it was content-wise, it was for a brand. And she saw that and she thought that we should be working on her project, and we were working on her project. We were fully invested in her project. But there was, something that she had asked that we said no to, and then we're online showing that what we were doing that day. Anyway, she went online and said they are doing that over client first. And I was like, that was another just huge check for me of yes. And it felt powerful, honestly, to be yes, that is exactly what we're doing. And this is exactly the type of people we are, the type of brand that we are, families first before client, period. And it's interesting because even last week, Jamie goes, have you ever looked at our Yelp? I was like, no. And he's like, we have a really bad review on there from last year. And I go, what? And we only got one bad review. And I like went on there. I was like, it's freaking Patty. And went on about, and the funny thing of it all too is like, we worked with her for a year. We gave her 100% of her money back because at the end of the day, we were like, this is not a good fit. And it was that last straw for me where I was like, what am I doing? Like, literally, what am I doing? Gave her all her money back, and she continued to write a review like that. And I was like, again, working with the people that understand us and don't cause unnecessary chaos like that, done.
I think, don't you think it goes both ways? I mean, I'm fine if a client emails me. I don't have any notifications on my phone. That's been really helpful.
Yes, I did that too.
Isn't it helpful?
Mm-hmm. Even like text, they don't pop up.
Nothing. I don't get any dings. Nothing of that stuff. It's so disruptive to your mental space.
It is.
If you call me,
especially
my phone will ring.
Like
Shocking.
us.
Guess what? A phone rings. You can use a phone, and if I turn it off, that means I'm not calling you right now. But people have gotten so carried away with texting,
and it's that sense of urgency again.
It is, yeah. And so just kind of figuring it out. But where I was going with this is respecting the client as well. I try to, I guess, on the early front as you're interviewing them, kind of walk them through your workflow. Hey, I'm available. For me, it's usually 8:30 to 4:30. That's kind of my window. I don't do nights and I don't do weekends.
Yep.
Send me an email if there's something urgent.
Yep.
Or not urgent. Send me an email and I will deal with it on the next business day.
Yep.
That is a reasonable expectation.
Yes.
We've talked about building because it's so intimate into your home. But it is still a business. I mean, you don't email your dentist on a Saturday and be like, I think, I think, next time I come in, I'd like a fluoride treatment or something like that.
Yeah.
So again, emergency's different. I get it. Like it's raining, you have a hailstorm, a window, something broke, you have water coming in. Yes. Text me, let me know it's an emergency. We'll obviously broke the protocol for that.
Yep.
So no problem.
Yeah.
I mean, no different than a medical emergency, right?
Yes, absolutely.
They usually tell you call 911. That actually would be a hilarious voicemail. If this is an emergency, please call your local authorities.
Topher actually put that as his autoresponder. It was sometime this year, but anyway, all of a sudden I got it and I was like, looked at it. I'm like as his boss, I was like, should I be mad about this? And I was like, no, because this is who he is. And I'm like, this is really funny because it said like in emergency. And he was doing a mentorship for a boys camp and like gone. And that's really important to him. And I'm like, this is so funny because he's like in emergency. And obviously our clients know Jamie and they also know Topher and his personality. But he put on there, call 911. I was like, oh my God.
That's pretty great. I love that a lot. Speaking of, how have you found, last year was a pretty big burnout year for you. And I would say, my burnout was a little bit different. I had something that was, the podcast was really energizing. It helped me balance out kind of some burnout. But how did you manage through burnout? Where you are right now, you're much calmer. You can just see it in your demeanor.
So
you seem, you just seem more.
I'm still a crazy but yeah.
Well, we have a lot of energy. That's how it goes. But anyway, walk us a little bit through how you realized you were burned out, what you did about it, and reflecting back, what would you tell yourself? If you could go back in time and talk to Morgan a year and a half to 2 years ago, what would you say?
Oh my gosh, that was so many. That could be a whole TV show in itself. Oh gosh, well, I don't know. I'm like, it was the winter and the spring, but obviously it was a carry over from many years and many things and doing things and growing pains and exploring through things. And I think the biggest thing for me, like last year, what I felt that I see now was like I was just getting sucked, is the best way to explain it, by a lot of people that are literally soul suckers. And like my brother gave me this book. It's called Give or Take, and I read through it, and I have now done the audiobook, and I'm just like, it was one of the best books I ever read. And it really talked about how people can show up as givers, but really they're takers, and they might not realize it either. And then I just started auditing and thinking about like all the people in my life that are truly were that. And sadly, again, like they don't know that. And just like rethinking, what we had just talked about. But anyway, all that, it's like I was making a lot of bad decisions. One, two, like drinking too much and stuff like that. And it just all came crashing down at the same time. You were with me through all of that. And I honestly just like totally, thanks to like good people that I have surrounded by and mentors and just friends, just had a hard conversation and just took time off life, like literally my phone, the internet, my work, everything. Like I checked out completely and I left. And with all that too, I'm like, that was a good reminder of, again, sense of urgency. Like nothing stopped. Everything still got taken care of. People did more, stepped up in more ways than I could ever realize. And I don't want to talk about it too much or I'll start crying.
I mean, as your friend, having been there and also watching go through it to the level that I did, I mean, I'm really proud of you as a friend, not only for going through it and coming through as a better person and more present, but also like kind of facing it head on.
Yeah.
And, and I don't know that much about obviously your past because our friendship is pretty young, if you will, in this span of time. But like, sunlight on something, honesty is never the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that not only resonates when people chat, when people are real and when people tell you that they've struggled and they look you in the eyes, like there's a connection between humans that it's not about clients. It's not about any of those things. It's just like, this is a person connecting. And it is a beautiful thing to watch people rise to help. And I was reminded years ago, that as somebody, like if you were to call me and ask for my help, well, you and I are good friends, so this is not even a good example because we ask our friends for help. But let's say you have like a tier, like a C-level friend, and this analogy is A friend, B friend, C friend, or someone you didn't even really know as your friend, and called you out of the blue and said, Morgan, I really need your help. The feeling of validation that they thought you were a friend that they could depend on is an incredible experience. It's happened a few times in my life, and you drop everything you're doing and you go, and it's funny how it's really hard for people to ask for help at baseline in general.
Yeah.
However, the feeling that you get as the person who gets to help somebody is a feeling that I don't know how really to describe it.
Yeah.
And I guess where I'm going with this is don't be afraid to humble yourself and ask for help because two things are going to come out of it. One, you're going to make someone else feel really good, really good.
That's true. Yeah.
And two, it does something to you when you've come to the place to ask for help that it makes you a better person.
Yeah.
I fundamentally believe that.
That's true. And it's really hard because I'm like, even that last question you said, like, what would you say back to yourself? And it's like, I've went through this so many times too, and thinking back and like, I don't even, like, it's almost like and I think this for anything that like with mental health too, is just like, you don't even realize because you're not clear-minded that potentially you need help. Or I think about just like suicide and stuff like that, when people are like, oh my gosh, I didn't know, or why didn't they say something? And I'm like, because they don't know either. Like they literally don't know until something happens where you kind of get shaken and woken up, or someone shakes them maybe. But yeah, that definitely, like I could have, like, again, leaned on my husband more or stuff like that, or had conversations, but instead it's like you deflect or you move on or you just focus on, that's like me too. It's like head down, I'm focused on whatever I'm focused on that day. And I'm just like, whatever, oops, okay, and just like, yeah.
Are you a very self-reflective person?
Yes. A little bit too deep sometimes.
I'm not at all.
Oh, you're not?
No,
Interesting.
like
Okay.
I don't really think about myself in terms of like deep thought at all. And so it takes the reason I'm bringing this up is like, it takes a big event. Like I need to be hit by a tree sometimes to realize. I'm sure my wife gets fatigued with doing it, but like sometimes I really need a heavy log over the head to be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was not seeing.
Yeah.
And,
I try to.
So that's why I was asking.
Yeah, that's good.
If you needed, like where I was going is like the experiences that you went through last year, like they sort of had to hit you over the head for you to realize that.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, so maybe I'm not either. And I think I am. But one thing that a professor told me in college that like I repeat it to myself every day, but is perception is reality. And so I think every day, like that's the sort of self-reflection I do is like when I don't agree or see something differently, I always try to be like, okay, or what I'm doing, I'm like, this is the way I'm perceiving it. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. So that's the kind of the way I self-reflect, I guess.
Yeah. No, I think do you find that, going back to this burnout and how you've kind of recovered. So you've had, obviously the last 6-7 months have been a great process. You've gone through some amazing life changes. speak, I know you can't speak all that much about it, but coming up here, whenever it is in the spring, you're doing a female-led ownership. I think it's called Build Her, kind of a retreat, just to kind of detach, have some mental resets. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah. Well, this actually, and maybe it'll be more public once we air this, but so 2 people that came to Contractor Coalition, again, talking about Contractor Coalition, the opportunities and the networking and all that have just been super cool. And throughout last year, the people from Contractor Coalition, you, right, included, I'm just like, these are like, honestly, the people who have shown up the most. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of crazy because I'm like, this is how I've formed these friendships, but they get it. Like, they get what we go through. They get all that. So all that to be said, 2 female builders here, we got on because they know exactly what happened to me. But through lovely conversations and everything, it's like, this industry's hard, and we're, like moms, and we're entrepreneurs, and we're wives, and, just trying to keep up with the Joneses and all of the things. And so anyway, all that to be said, like, we were like, we need something for just a small, intimate, again, not something super overly aggressive, talking like 10, 15 females, builders, to just reset and refocus. I also think men need this, but we're starting with, I told Nick and Brad, I'm like, we should spin off something with that, right? But
I think that's amazing. I talked often a little bit more about that. Well, it's funny because and maybe we'll talk at the end of this episode here about the Contractor Coalition and what's coming up here in the spring a little bit. But before we do, a few alumni and I, after we had gone through the first 2, I think I woke up one morning early, 5:30, whatever. I think it was out in California, so Minnesota time. It wasn't that early, but anyway,
2 hours on the beach.
Yeah, but Caleb McDonald, a builder from Canada, was a big runner, and he and I got up and we ran down the beach together, and we went to the gym, and there were builders. And anyway, it was this point of it. There's this stereotype that builders. This is a stereotype because I don't think it's true. I actually don't even know any builders like this hardly. And it's the black and red flannel, bearded, ripped jean, beard guzzling handyman who does it all.
For sure.
They obviously exist, but everyone at the coalition and all the builders I network with are pretty, they're into working out. They're into athletics.
We did yoga.
Whatever it is. And I guess what we were left with after doing that is like, there's enough people just in a 30 people sample size. Imagine the whole country.
I know.
We talked about doing sort of an add-on day at that time. It was actually Michael Gutelli and Nathan Marsala and I had kind of said, hey, when we go down to Austin for the Contractor Coalition, which ended up being my birthday. And
I was like, you didn't come.
I didn't come. And so I kind of petered out. But the point is like, we were going to come up with kind of like an add-on day. And I mean, it's one of those things, you're telling me to say no. I usually have to, the problem is I have like 5 business ideas a week. And it's like, which one do I actually pursue? Because one of them has long been what you're doing with this Build Her program, which is I want to do something that's less about building. And because the time that we went out to California, one of the early days, it was Brad, Nick, myself, it was Patterson Custom Homes, his project manager. We went surfing for a couple hours.
So
and
fun.
and I stink at surfing, but I love the water.
That's great.
And so it's like, it was just nice to be with people together in sort of a healthy environment. And then, you get together and you chat. And I think there would be a great community around that.
Oh, for sure.
And it'd be interesting. Anyway, I'm very interested to see how successful the Build Her is. And, I would like to do something like that as well.
Yeah.
I don't think
so. We're going to Costa Rica.
Yeah.
To get our mental health in check.
Yeah. I love it.
It's going to be great.
That's great. Let's talk about the Contractor Coalition. So this spring, it's coming to Minneapolis.
Yes. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
So it's coming to Minneapolis. He'll be in our hometown in May. And then, I'm excited because we're moving into our third, we're in our 3rd year. And everyone has been successful. It's sold out. Again, it's just brought in like the best. And I always say I'm biased, but I'm like, I mean every word. I'm like, every person in every group that we've had these conferences, like they're so incredible. I think they truly are like wanting to change the industry, and they're doing it. And I honestly think too, like what I'm realizing the more with Contractor Coalition moving on and stuff, just again, some local, because really it's not nationally, because any national person I surround myself is like us and like doing more and more and thinking bigger and broader. But like now it almost shocks me when people live in this scarcity mindset, or I hear it from anyone locally. They're like, oh, how's business? Are you scared? And I'm like, wow, I haven't heard that in forever, because I'm literally surrounding myself with Contractor Coalition people. And I'm like, these people will never go out of business ever. I'm like, because there's so much opportunity and they see it and they're doing it and they're implementing it. So anyway, I'm super pumped about Minneapolis.
I think the secret there, those people, that group, is they're constantly evolving.
Mm-hmm.
They're constantly trying and failing.
Yeah.
I know.
And learning
you're learning
and sharing
and
it,
sharing.
so
I think
we don't have to.
You've coined it for me, and whether you heard it or made it up, it doesn't matter. But it's the collaboration over competition. Yeah. I've used that
definitely
line so many times.
Or definitely from someone else, but
I just love it. But
yeah.
I love it, and I love it that you embody it. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's given. It's funny how people, especially our age group, seem more apt to just share. Mm-hmm. And I think there is so much power in the collective mindset and what we can learn from each other. 100%. Why do we all feel like we have to be little islands and learn all this stuff on our own?
Yeah.
And we're doing our first pilot test for this networking group locally. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk more about it if we're going to launch it. But my plan is to launch like a series of networking events, just like a 3-hour
so cool.
deal. Mm-hmm. It's like not contractor coalition, but it's in that vein of collaboration here mm-hmm. locally.
Yeah.
Nationally you have the Builder 20 groups. Mm-hmm. Contractor coalition is like 3 days of like intense mm-hmm. Business scrutiny and knowledge. So it's like, getting a master's degree in 3 days.
Yeah.
It's highly worth it for anyone listening that hasn't gone. I've gone twice. This will be my third time. So even if you've gone before, it's amazing how many people want to go again. I interviewed Meg Billings from Meg Custom Homes. Shout out to her. But, she's gone twice, and I'm trying to get her to come to a third time. But she said that it's right after IBS. She's got something else going.
I know. She gave me her agenda, and I was like, don't care. Like, one of those have to be a no. So here I'm pushing my agenda.
She told me she'd get divorced if she came. So I said, no. Or family first. I said, babe, you can hit up the next. Where's the fall one going to be?
In Boston, which we already are well underway planning. We already have sponsorships for it. We already have our website live. So pumped about it. And we're already planning 2025, working with Builder Trend on, they're going to do something really cool. Can't share too many details, but to every alumni, they're going to be doing something really cool. So I'm like, just that too. I feel like we're forming this bigger, network or.
It is. Yeah. I think right now, there's, for those that don't know about it, you can head to our link, and we obviously post a lot about it. And so does Morgan on her feed. We're actually going to be having the Curious Builder is going to do a live podcast. Yes. I think it's on May 16th. It's that Thursday.
Yes.
I think the Contractor Coalition kicks off on a Wednesday night and goes through Saturday or Friday.
Yeah. Well, this one too being, it's in my hometown, and then it's like, oh, we could do this, that, and poor Nick and Brad and their wives, because they're like, Morgan, we got to rein it in a little bit, and they have families. But we are going to do some brand tours beforehand, which is really fun. So all that is, I always say, optional, but everyone comes to everything. And then Thursday we'll do, which I'm pumped about. So, and what I'm already saying and telling people, I'm like, these are 3, in my opinion, the best contractor podcasts out there. You guys all have also the same producer, right? And I'm like, all of them are going to be in the same room. Locally here, you're silly if you do not show up for that.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty amazing. It'll be Brad Levitt at the AFT Construction Podcast, now renamed the Brad Levitt Podcast. Mm-hmm. We've got the Modern Craftsman with Nick Schiffer and Tyler Grace. Yes, and then we have you.
Yeah.
And then we have me playing host.
Yeah.
I was thinking you've got a bunch of alphas in the room. So it's like we're going to need a lion taming whip too. It'd be very interesting. I was thinking about this morning, actually. It'd be very interesting to see how you keep if everyone is interviewers, how a panel, this thing could go off the rails.
I know.
It'd be very
it's going to be great.
It is going to be great. Oh, there's so much knowledge.
Yeah.
That'd be very,
so
very
much knowledge. Well, and we have a great lineup of sponsors too, and more that are coming, but it's going to be at the North House in Minneapolis, which is a great location. And so this will lead into our opening welcome party, if you will, for Contractor Coalition. And they have golf simulators in there. They have couches. All the food and drinks will be covered. Like, it's just going to be an awesome evening. I think
it'll be a fantastic
kick off
networking event. Obviously the things that will be shared will be pretty amazing from each one of those individuals. But then just the after networking side, you're dealing with people from all over the country, some of the biggest names in building on top of it.
Well, and that are coming in, like people already signed up for Contractor Coalition. All of them as of right now, besides you and Jay Kath, are all national builders, big builders, already flying into Twin Cities for this. So I'm like, just that alone. And they're like uber successful, and they're coming to this to. Yeah.
Is there is there room for more tickets? I know the tickets are not sold out yet.
Yeah. We have like 10
left.
Again, in 3 weeks from now, I don't know.
Yeah. So
The live though.
the live will be available to, I think, maybe 100 to a couple hundred.
Yeah, a couple hundred.
That'll be, that's kind of an add-on. But the actual coalition itself, if anyone is interested to kickstarting their business, going to start a business. I mean, I was building for 18 years and I learned more in the first couple, I would say half day. I mean, it was incredible. Even today, I'm still implementing. In fact, I'm doing my first pull plan
Oh my gosh,
in a couple weeks. I was talking to Meg Billings about it. I'm like, oh man, I've kind of put it off. It's like, I'm going to do it. So we're going to do it here in a couple weeks.
Well, that's another thing I say too, and I've had a ton of conversations with people here locally and nationally about Contractor Coalition, and half the time they're like, oh, I might be, too young. And I'm like, if I were to tell anyone, I'm like, launch a business and do this and then launch a business. I'm like, you will have all the tools set up for success for this price point. I'm like, I can't even begin to say how much money we have burned and also super valuable too, but invested in to get what we share that you will have access to. I'm like, or like you said, you've been in business for 18 years. I'm like, there's so much new information, or yes, sometimes we repeat content, but even from what I did in, what month is it? I don't know. But this past fall in Austin, the content that I shared when it comes to marketing, like I've been reworking all of my decks now because I'm like, marketing changes so fast. And also there's so much more and new opportunities now where I'm like, I need to share this, or maybe simplify this, or maybe do 2.0 of this.
I think it speaks to that collective mindset of evolution. I mean, as we're, we all follow each other, their Instagram feeds, their LinkedIn feeds, their business, their websites, you stay, and it's from not a competition standpoint, but from an encouragement standpoint, especially because I used to, for so long, I build in Minnesota. I don't build in California or Malibu or Seattle or Austin or Phoenix or any of these cool places. But my mindset was too narrow, and realizing now that really the world's your oyster and you can gain knowledge from everybody. It's kind of it's a super elixir to your company. Yeah. And I would say that just thinking about for myself, like I feel like in my career, I've taken several steps up. I've taken some steps down, and then usually a step down preceded a step up. Like right now, I would feel like, I had to let 2 people go right before the new year. Right. And we had 2 jobs that canceled, high interest rates, and we just couldn't support, that type of overhead. But I feel like 24 and 25, I'm actually very excited about it. I am too. And I feel like there's a lot of opportunity. So I feel like right now it's a step down, but I feel like the step up to kind of another level is coming quickly. I do too. Well, and that's one thing too of like what anything last year taught me with clarity and purpose and living intentionally. Because some things people will say is like, oh, aren't you supposed to slow down? It looks like you're speeding up. And I'm like, no. But now I'm like, I am balls to the wall, like head down, focused. And this might sound aggressive, but I truly think like anything I want to do this year, like I'm going to do it. And I'm like, you just ask one, like something you need or you need a connection to. I'm like, I have 2 big lofty goals that are, 2-year goals, but I just met with someone the other day and I was like, I'm just going to ask them if they know of anyone that is a buyer for X, Y, and Z, because one of my big things is like, I want a product line and I want it within the next 2 years and I want it in big box retailers. And I'm like, what am I afraid of? Why don't I just start asking someone, hey, who's the buyer at Target? Like, I want to know their name and I want to get a 1 degree of separation connection. So I'm like, why not? Like, what do you have to lose? Well, you'd be a perfect fit. Yeah. I can't imagine any brand saying that they wouldn't want to get behind that. If anything, it seems like, why didn't you do this 5 years ago?
I know. But things like that, now I'm like, okay, now I can focus on the things that I truly want to be focused on. But yeah, when you're dialed in like that and you are surrounded by people like that show up at Contractor Coalition, I'm like, you have the support, you have the resources, everyone's an open book. Start asking the questions, be vulnerable, show up, and vice versa. So I just think it's an amazing group in that way too.
Yeah. Well, if you're listening locally, there's plenty of opportunity to either join it or join that live podcast that I think is May 16th. And if you're from outstate, come on in. Minnesota in the springtime is not a bad spot. You don't have to worry about the cold.
I know. I was a little nervous about that. Nick and Brad were like, Minneapolis. And I'm like, I want people to show up in Minneapolis like in the best light. And I'm like, May could be a little dicey. But
mid-May, it should be fine.
It's going to be great.
It's fine. It'll be warm.
We're going to be golfing.
Yeah. I mean, considering the weather we're having right now,
I know
it'll be just fine.
Yeah. Very weird.
Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
It was awesome. You're the official first alumni to the podcast. Yeah, no pressure. Hopefully people were able to find some commonality
I love it.
in this messaging. So I appreciate you for being vulnerable, for being brave, and for
Thank
sharing
you.
your story and
Yeah.
for your friendship.
I made it without crying. That's so good.
Very good. Thanks for joining in the Curious Builder podcast. Till next time. Thanks for listening to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So like and review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at curiousbuilderpodcast.com.